And welcome back, everybody. Or welcome if today's your first one because you didn't get to come see us yesterday. I'm thrilled. In fact, thank you, everyone who took some time to send me a note or to post on social media. It's really a delight to know when something we're offering is useful. And like we all like positive kudos, but more important to me is how you're applying it, what you're hearing, how you're reflecting on it, how you might be integrating it. We are all better together when we have an opportunity to be in community as practitioners, leaders, and coaches alike. So thank you. And I'm going to wait just another minute or two as people are coming in to the room. Something that you could do in chat. I would love to know. We have this process that we do in our education rooms where I'll ask them what their midnight mail was. Now, what I mean by that is that the unconscious does a whole bunch of work for us overnight. Sometimes it gives us a dream, but not always. But it's always working. And I find that people wake up realizing that they got a message, right? That there's something lingering. It's maybe at the top of mind, or they have a feeling state and it draws back the memory of something they've done the day before. And since you were with us for a good couple of hours yesterday, you might have some midnight mail. So that's my metaphoric way of saying if there's something that's popped to mind for you, to please share that in the chat and reconnect with each other and the work from yesterday when we were exploring how to move from one-to-one to one-to-many. We're going to build on some of that, and it's totally fine if you weren't here yesterday, no worries. Um, it's something that occurred to me is that when we think about coming to the edge of mastery, I think this is a human desire, aspiration. It doesn't really matter whether we are speaking about someone who is in a leadership role or a coaching role, because at the end of the day, I firmly believe that every human is a leader of at least themselves. And we can all benefit from dropping into the paradigm of coaching, and particularly of generative work, which is far more focused on the overall development and embodiment of wholeness than transaction alone. So we'll keep going, leadership and coaching both today. And how do we get to the edge of mastery? And in the meantime, if there's something lingering, if you had some midnight mail from last night that showed up this morning from yesterday, please share that with everyone in the chat pod. What showed up for me was how much I love working in collectives and what a joy it is to focus on energy exchange and how we build on each other's ideas. I mean, so much of our work as coaches and frankly, leaders, particularly the higher up you go into an organization, can feel kind of lonely. We get kind of caught in our own heads and thoughts. And the opportunity to come into community and exchange ideas and especially for me to hear how someone else received something I said, it's always a joy. It's like, oh, I hadn't thought about that angle of it. That's really cool. So maybe an invitation to you to be generous with yourself and with chat. And actually, at any point, if you want to interrupt me, you can either choose to use the raise your hand, I'll pay attention to that, or you can just say, hey, Janet, wait a second. That would be totally fine too. Yesterday's quality of just open conversation, I think, made a big contribution to our learning together. So let's keep that rolling along. All right, I think we have who we're going to have for today. Lori, if you wouldn't mind just keeping an eye if somebody's trying to come in the room and be sure and let them in quickly. That would be great.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, so session 2, coaching at the edge of mastery. And I would say, whether you're a leader or coach, we're all doing this. In fact, one thing I was thinking about this morning as I was preparing to be with everyone is a conversation I had about 2 years ago with a gentleman who does a lot of work at Microsoft in the sales or in the global sales organization. And we were kibitzing a little bit about what if we really flipped the model on its head. And we said that the very first time someone steps into a leadership role, so their first leading of other people, maybe it's through agile, maybe it's through more traditional project management, maybe it's really just frontline leadership. What if the very first thing they learned about was to communicate using the coaching mindset and skill set? And that became the way in which organizations learn to create connection and a sense of belonging with each other. And then you build to the other leadership behaviors and principles and values on top of that that make it more unique to the culture of the organization. So I plant that seed with you just to give you that as an idea, maybe to open a conversation and to think for yourself, gosh, when I first started my people leadership role, what would that have changed in the way you experienced yourself growing into confidence and comfort with expanding your scope and scale over time? So knowing today we're going to talk about really quite an integration between the two. And ultimately, what does it mean to be at the edge of mastery for ourselves? Here's our roadmap where we're going to go today. So I've already started talking a little bit about lead and coach at the edge. Notice the byline here says, value occurs by what's not yet known. This is a very foundational idea that differentiates traditional performance and transactional coaching from work that's a bit more transformative. We'll then talk a bit about how do we, as practitioners, leader and coach alike, give ourselves permission for spontaneity. When so much of our professional lives is guided by the be a subject matter expert, be excellent in your work so that you have reliable, consistent performance. And in the process, we often crowd out the ability to recognize what's happening right in the moment that carries the seed of innovation for us. How do we do that? Through a deep presencing. And that's a skill. Presence is not something that you build once and have the ability to repeat it. You probably can figure out it's because we're always changing. What are the micro skills that go with that? Noticing and tracking energy. We're going to talk a little bit more building on what we did last time in terms of understanding that the client in one-to-many work is the field or pattern of interaction. What is this in thinking about how does a leader embody their presence and what are we paying attention to support them in being even more effective? I'm going to revisit generative wholeness a little bit, mostly from the perspective of transcending our sense of role bias. I think my job as a leader is X. I think my job as a coach is Y. Um, and how do I have more fluidity, perhaps, to allow a deeper presence in any interaction I'm in? And then we'll talk a little bit about how do you strengthen over time. And my objective, of course, is to have you leave with some things that will empower you and strengthen your work toward a more advanced level. Now,
Janet,
yeah,
sorry. I
sure.
just wanted you to know I have to be co-host to be able to welcome people in. And I just put it in the chat, but if you would take just a minute to do that so we
I
can get
will be happy to do that. Hold on a second, everybody. I have to come up where I am to do that. All right. Well, let me do two things here. Okay. I'm going to admit all those people, and
great.
then I'm going to find you, Lori, and say, there you are. Thanks. See, now that's a really good thing to interrupt me for.
Yeah, I don't do it very often, as you know, so it was important. Thank
Well,
you.
come on. You need to model. It's all good. You guys are
That's right.
welcome to interrupt me at any point if you have something that comes up that you want to ask about. So, all right, let me go back here. All right. So, as we did yesterday, I think it's really important to understand the bias of what we're talking about. And I wanted to share some new data. This came from the fourth quarter. Gallup does an annual study on what do followers want from leaders. This is a global study, and they are looking at the full spectrum of one's life experience, personal and professional. 52 countries were respondents in this particular study. And they were very surprised by the results. Now, you'll notice there are three things leaders must know in order to be successful in this environment we find ourselves in. The four needs of their followers. I'm going to show you that in just a second. They also need to know themselves and to invest in their innate strengths as leaders. Uh, your choice to be here for this masterclass is a really good example of doing that. And also to know the demands of and expectations attached to their specific leadership role. And as you'll see in the data, this is because it's important that you're sharing that information with the followers in your organization. All right. So maybe before I do the reveal, just think if you know what the four needs are. What are the four needs of followers from their leaders? And just they're one word. See if you can guess what you think they are. Write them down on a piece of paper. I'm going to count to 10 and then I'll show you. Okay, there you go. Hope, trust, compassion, and stability. And for even the folks at Gallup, they were surprised at how high hope was. In fact, it's eclipsing trust. Trust is the need for honesty, respect, and integrity. We had it yesterday. It was the top thing that we thought was the challenge, the process challenge for being effective in one-to-many work. The question was trust. But what we're seeing in this reporting is that hope is even more important. 57% of respondents put hope first, 33% put trust second. So when we take out the personal life, because of course we were looking at the full life experience in this survey, and we only look at the organizational context, what they found was that number went to 64%. If you were 18 to 29 years old, it was 67%. Now, some of you might be following census data. You know, we have almost 8 billion. Actually, I think we're over 8 billion people on the planet now. And a little more than 4 billion are in that age 30 and below. So there is something happening societally. And the two elements of hope that they were able to zero in on from the respondents was the need to feel positive about the future. And the second, for leaders to provide a clear direction. Not necessarily casting a compelling vision, useful, definitely useful for leaders to do, but that when it's translated, that people can feel a sense of certainty. I bet there isn't a one of us on the line here that wouldn't suggest that right now that would feel really good. Well, all of us have the opportunity to decide what that is for ourselves. We introduced sovereignty a little bit yesterday. I'm going to weave that in a bit more today. I do have the power of choice always. Sometimes I might forget. And that's where an interaction with a colleague, peer to peer, or working with a coach over time can help us to remember, oh, yeah, I have the power of choice. And that includes our emotions. Do I focus my attention on the things that are falling apart, or that are chaotic, that are difficult or challenging, or come in from the left field? Or am I focusing on the things that are uh, associated with where I do feel positivity? Maybe the one thing you can do every day is to be grateful for the sun coming up. I mean, there are some days when that doesn't even feel like it's enough. But as simple as that is an example of how leaders can help people feel positive. One of the things we do here at Invite Change is we always do a check-in, and it would have something to do with what's a win you're celebrating since I saw you last week? Or, what's the biggest surprise that delighted you in the last 24 hours? And it can be personal or professional, it doesn't matter. But giving attention to fueling that sense of positivity, in addition to the, hard brass tacks of, and where are we going? And why are we going there? And what are we doing to get there? That's what hope is all about. All right, so let's keep going. I want you to give yourself time to really let in here these first three. When we think about the International Coaching Federation, forever, actually, we're celebrating 30 years this year in our professional association. And we've always talked about the reason the association exists is to advance the art, science, and practice of coaching. So I want to give you a chance to really think about that holistically. What does it mean to have advanced? And you'll see there the act or process of mastering, the state of having mastered expertise, to have a command of your expertise. I don't particularly like the word supremacy because it gives you that more than, less than. But, what is it to be supreme in your inner understanding of how you demonstrate your competency? Leader or coach, doesn't matter. Artistry is having um, something that helps you feel unique in your expression, in the way that you demonstrate the skills. And the science, something a bit more unemotional, maybe more systemic, something that can be observed, so testable explanations and predictions. Now, you probably know the word that's coming next, since this is what we're working on, which is mastery. And how does mastery show up? The state of having mastered that expertise. Oh, look what I did. I made a mistake. I guess I don't have mastery in my PowerPoint. I'm going to tell you what advanced is because it's not the same as mastery. How about that? But in the meantime, I will go get that. And I want to give you an opportunity to quietly reflect before we go into pairs. As you think about mastery, science, artistry, and I'll go get you advanced in just a second. What is your personal experience of leading and coaching in terms of skills and mindset? Notice what assumptions and biases surface as you're reflecting. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do this. And it is important, like have a piece of paper, just jot some ideas down for each of these four for yourself so that you are, and much like we tune an instrument, you're tuning your attention. How do I think about my artistry, my science, and my mastery in leading and in coaching? And I'll be right back while I go away and find you the right answer for advanced. But I'll leave the display on here for you too. Sorry. Mm-mm-mm-mm. And you're gonna want, let's see, this slide right there. Everybody got it? Can you see it okay? Just give me a thumbs up. Great. All right, I'll be right back. Okay, now you have the advanced definition. Has everybody had a chance to work it? Just give me a nod or a thumbs up. I'm looking at the screen. Okay, good. All right. You're going to either be in pairs or triads. And what I'd like you to do is to get to know each other. You know, who am I? My name is Hideo Watanabe, and my top personal value is freedom. I'm just guessing, Hideo. Share your top personal value with each other. And then have a discussion about what you discovered in your assumptions and biases. Okay. You'll have about 10 minutes together. And when we come back, we'll dive into what you learned and how it applies to the pursuit of mastery. Any questions? I'm not seeing any, so here you go. You guys get cut off mid-sentence when they beamed you back in the main room. Yeah. I always find myself wanting to finish the sentence. Like I want to guess if I know what the person was going to say before they got cut off. Did you have a good connection? Yes, I'm seeing nods of yes. All good. All right. So popcorn a couple things for me. What did you discover were your assumptions and biases? Yes, that means you need to open your mic.
I assume that people can hear me even without my mic on.
Oh, Paula, come on. I know you're really powerful woman, but gotta need that mic. So you're gonna turn your mic back on? No?
I was just cracking a joke, as I'm wont to do. I
I see.
apologize.
I see. Assumptions and bias are really important for us to pick up. You know, I think about my early days as a leader. The first time I was a people leader, I had a team of 22 data entry clerks. I was working in what's called control cashiers of a financial services company. And half of that group were from countries outside of the United States where I was at a tender age. I'd only traveled out of the US once. I did have a passport, but I'd only been to Sweden. That was the only country. I hadn't been to Mexico or Canada. And I have people from Asia and I have people from South America. And I was like, how do I manage these people? And I had so many assumptions and biases about who I thought they were and what they needed that mostly proved to be wrong. It was an early lesson of, oh, curiosity goes a long way. So, Hami, why don't you go and then Christy right after, please?
Thank you, Janet, and thank you, the partners in the breakout room. Very, very insightful, short conversation, but the value we talked about was connection. And I found that at the first I was about to talking about the bias, but that connection gave a space that I looked at the bias in another way and just focus on the value that was the same value between three of us. And I loved it. And just want to share that yeah, biases are existing, but just a question and just the same value can just shift the view and the way of your looking. And I like it. It was not a big achievement, but it was very important for me because I touched it. Thank you.
You know, Hami, you've just beautifully modeled wholeness. Most of us probably hear the word assumption and bias and think negatively about it. But assumptions and bias just are. They are our experience expressed outwardly. And we can have that wonderful experience of realizing, oh, I have a bias to connection, not just a bias to fill in the blank that might have been negative, right?
Yeah.
What are our biases at a values level that create unity? Because that's there too. it's not just the things that we're holding out of the societal norm. There's a lot more.
Yeah, it was yeah, great point. It was a way that it was a way that carried have been carried so far unbiased concept or biased term, but in this case, it was a shift of definition or the wholeness of these things, like the wholeness of us as a human. Thank you.
Exactly.
Ooh, it was top.
Go ahead, Chrissy.
Yeah, I think one of the assumptions that came up for me is, and I come from the leader perspective, is sometimes I assume I have to fix it all,
Mhm.
right? And so in thinking about hope, right, and hope being one of these things that followers want from a leader, my organization has about 35 employees, and I don't talk to every single one of them every day, maybe even every week. And so the idea that I alone, or even the C-suite alone, could affect everyone's feeling of hope in the organization, because there's so much influence from peers that they talk to on a daily basis. So if they're talking to people who aren't hopeful, it could have an effect that I don't even see. So I can't assume I can fix it all. I need the help of everyone else to fix it, which leads me to when I have conversations with staff about, issues they're having, how do I sort of, you know, use my creativity to really listen and ask those questions that you don't know the answer to, so you can hear what they're saying and to ask the next question, to try to get them hopeful about what they can do about their own issues, right? Because they usually come to me in a place where they're frustrated and they're stressed out. And how do they leave the conversation feeling empowered but hopeful about, a potential solution?
You got it. Spot on. Well, I can't wait to see how that impacts your teams. And you're reminding me of a chief medical officer during COVID. So this is in 2020. And one of the things they implemented in their teams conversations, because they would have hundreds of docs on the line all at one time, they would leave the first 5 to 6 minutes for a chat direct message stream to go. What was something that touched you, that touched your heart deeply yesterday? Because they were doing the stand-ups every single day out of the incident command. And she'd come to coaching sessions just in tears at how extraordinarily resilient they were as a result of sharing those positive feelings with each other. And sometimes what they were touched by wasn't so optimistic, but it was the in the face of we persevered or we were able to get through. And that goes back to what Hami was talking about with the connection.
Yeah.
We don't, I think we sometimes overcomplicate what is required to invite each other to be in a common experience of a situation and realize, oh, that's the situation. I am so much more than that one thing.
Right.
Oh, great. All right. So where does all my bias and assumption come from? I thought you might want to see this a little more in detail today. So what what I started to recognize as I was um, working as an entrepreneur. So I launched into organizational consulting and coaching and education in 1996. Oh my gosh, that feels like a long time ago. And I would ask leaders, do you know how it is that you got to where you are? Do you know what inside of you makes it possible to produce results that the organization expects or to exceed them for as many years as you have? And this might surprise you, but they couldn't answer my question. Not at a level where they could mentor somebody on their team. It's like, oh, well, this is the thing that's important to give your attention to and to strengthen. And the more that I talked with leaders across different industries, I began to see a pattern, and generative comes out of that. I already had a sense of the wholeness because, so much of work that we do is about achieving. What do I need to acquire in my knowledge, in my skills and abilities, in my mindset, and in my experience to achieve? But even that doesn't quite get to our whole wholeness, right? At some point in your professional lives, you've hit those moments when you realize, I'm not bringing everything. My A game's going to require everything. My creativity might be in my tango dancing that I do on the weekend that I don't tell anybody about at work. And yet, the reason I dance tango is because it lets me express things in my body and the music that I love and the joy that I feel of being able to move on the floor. What would be how would that be a metaphor for a movement that fully expresses myself at work? This is what we mean by wholeness. Are we accessing everything that is ours? And so generative wholeness is speaking to a state of being individually, in teams, one to many, in the organization as a whole, just as Chrissy beautifully described what she might create as a ripple effect in every conversation. And it's based on the premise that everything necessary already exists. The solutions, potential, unrealized at this moment, but when asked, gets accessed and realized. And then ultimately the creativity that comes from using it. And that's rooted in the principle of sovereignty. Yes, I realize it's multisyllabic, but it's quite simple. Sov in Latin means self, and reign means ruling, self-ruling. And ultimately, I think whether you come in the door of your spirituality or you come in the door of having had a mentor or a sponsor or a guide at some point along your leadership journey, your life journey, who you've become today, you've recognized that the best advice always comes inside. That there inside of you is, from all of that experience of your becoming, you realize I have the authority to make choices in how I relate to my life. I also have the authority to slow my pace down or speed my pace up. That these can be conscious, deliberate choices. I firmly believe that being a human doesn't have a destination. But if we decide to be conscious, deliberate, and intentional from the wholeheartedness of being a human, then we have an opportunity to be thriving. Now, it comes with a hook. We have to accept responsibility for it. So much of our life, our neurobiology is predisposed to habit, and habit is energy conservation in our bodies. Unfortunately, it's a little bit rooted in keeping ourselves out of harm's way. Our bodies, many of you probably have studied something in the neuroscience space, and so you know that we are predisposed to look at something and say, is it a threat? Am I in danger? And the habit response to that, you all know the sympathetic system is going to ask us to flee, or we're going to freeze, or we're going to fight. I think there's another one I call now fracture, where we're overwhelmed by how much is coming at us. And our response is to just not take it all in, let it deflect or bounce off of us. All of those responses are protective responses. And when we pause, this is those of you that have mindfulness practices or meditation perhaps, or maybe you do yoga as a physical practice for yourself. The breath helps us restore access to the parasympathetic system, the place of calm, the place that silence and the breath helps us remember we have lots of resource and capability inside. Yes, life is chaotic out there, but in this moment, I'm going to choose to ground and center. And then we can face the chaos again. But that's a practice. It's never something that happens because we just thunk it. The other element here, of course, is we're talking about moving beyond the transactional. If we're going to live in a generative way, if we allow ourselves to access all of our wholeness and express it, then that must be a practice that we show up in the world, a shorthand for the word presence. We interact with other people and we make decisions that are based in accessing our wholeness. One really quick way to short circuit is to notice without reacting. Notice where we have habit and bias, which is what you just did in the exercise we were doing in the breakout rooms. And then, of course, being able to perceive your wholeness through a lens that is based in your authentic self. You might just ask yourself right now, How many times a week do you pause and ask yourself, am I living out of my authenticity? Not defined by anybody else, because that's their authenticity projected on you, but the essence of who you know yourself to be. I'm an alchemist. I've known that since I was a little girl. I have always had a healthy relationship with change. I suppose in some ways because life didn't look like it made sense to me as a kid growing up. Because I'm different on the outside, I have a birthmark on my face. I had a lot of people who were making me wrong for my difference, but I didn't feel wrong inside. I felt perfectly fine inside. In fact, thank you very much. I was quite a happy little girl. And that's carried with me in my life that I can accept unconditionally my own self. And I'm going to express from that so that others recognize that they have that space to be that way with me. Now, one example, and there are lots of, um, oh God, undignified ways in which humans are being with each other all over the planet. I think a part of the answer for us is to help each person come back home to themselves and to start to remember, oh, when I'm in my authentic self, I am whole. I know this place. And to begin to bring that as a practice for themselves. Because the more we do that, the easier it is to see others and to see others' wholeness and to be role models for that, to be the way we are together. I really do think humans being better humans is part of why coaching came onto the forefront 30 years ago. And no, I have the bias. We've been coaching each other since humans could grunt. And what I'm speaking to is, why did it constellate in the way that it did 30 years ago? What is it that we're after? And I think it is that state of wholeness. So I'm going to pause here to say, I've given you the concepts. We've talked a little bit about some of the elements and principles that go into generative wholeness. And whether you are working with me or any of my team at Invite Change in an educational setting, our advanced generative coaching program, which is a level 3 accreditation with ICF, or our level 2 or level 1 programs that carry generative wholeness in it as well, or you're coming to us for coaching as a leader or to engage with your teams. These 4 things are always present. What is a generative foundation? Helping people connect to the essence of themselves and to stand in that place of wholeness. What is the way we communicate that's generative? It is different. We're not doing analysis. We're not asking questions we know the answer to test if the other person knows. Those are going to be fine if we're trying to do problem analysis, but not so fine if we're creating connection that has honesty, respect, and integrity in it, and the opportunity for people to be able to receive the clear direction. Ultimately, that means what we're doing is cultivating generative learning. And when the going gets rough, how do you face the navigation of the obstacles that show up? So these 4 are always present, whether we're in coaching or educational or consulting, all the time. This is the nature of the work we do and Invite Change. And yesterday, we talked quite a bit about one-to-many. And this same rubric is there because as adults, we know we learn best by story and by experience, hands-on experience, application. So you'll find that what you will do outside of coaching or outside of an educational process will replicate what you've been doing inside the coaching and education process. Rapid implementation and application is what we're after. None of us has any time to waste. Getting up every morning and realizing this precious thing called time, it's our choice to make the most of it. So all of our programs are designed this way to give you the best possibility to implement immediately in a positive way. So let's keep this paradigm going. And I want to talk a little bit about, give you some time to play with it. What do you think gets in the way? Some of you might know this poem. See if you can give yourself a chance to feel it new as I say it out loud for you. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there is little we can do to change. So it might be that autopilot of the unconscious and habit that's operating, but it also might be that we're so focused out there on the next thing to do, we've forgotten to give priority to how we're being. What is the emotional and sensory system experience I'm having? Because I guarantee you, you do notice when something is different than it was before and it's asking you to change, but we override it. Until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. And this is the challenge. We wait until it feels horrible. Um, the graphic metaphor everybody uses about the frog in the pan of water, and we turn on the flame and it gets a little hotter and a little hotter and a little hotter until the frog realizes its legs are too weak to jump out of the boiling water. Well, we kind of do that to ourselves as humans too. We wait until the tension is so high that we call it conflict, and then something intervenes to help us get rid of the conflict or to manage it as if it's a state we want to hold on to. Geez, couldn't we do it a little earlier by noticing the tension? So I give you a little acronym here. Team techniques. Well, the acronym is this. First of all, tune into energy. So ask yourself right now, are you someone who notices that tension is present in your body? Like maybe when your shoulders are up by your ears, or you're feeling sick to your stomach, or um, your joints, your hips and your knees know you've been sitting in the chair too long, but you keep working instead of getting up and stretching. Tune into the energy in the body and your emotions, not just in your head. Hopefully, it's not headaches that are doing it for you. Ask generative questions. There's all kinds of ways to ask questions. The 5 whys are a great analysis technique. Not so good for connection. Do you, will you, have you, are you? These are all yes, no responses. We're not going to learn anything from that. And learning is key to being generative. In fact, this was the thing that most leaders did not realize, that the reason they're successful producing results is because they're consummate learners over and over and over again, realizing if I pay attention to what I don't know yet, I'm always going to get better. And it's what fuels imagination. Learning drives original thinking. And we can't stop there. We have to translate it into creativity. But there's no way I can know everything in the world. None of us can. We're always joined by other smart people in the room. Generative questions that start with what, for most of the time, invite others to share with us, and that begins the innovation process. This one's the toughest. The very best leaders I ever worked for were masters at this. They would ask a question, they would let me answer, and then we'd be in quiet, sometimes for as much as almost a whole minute. And I would be aware that I was absorbing what I had just said. And I was also watching how the leader across from me was absorbing what I had just said, which felt incredibly respectful. And then usually it was followed by another question that wove in what I had said that he or she had found useful. So mirror back. Yes, you all learned how to do verbatim mirror back. You've probably learned how to do paraphrasing in your active listening training. I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about here is mirroring the reflection in the mirror. What was your experience of the person? What did you allow yourself to be influenced by emotionally or physically? What image might have come to mind that is a metaphor for who this person is being with you that you valued and found useful? So, learning to reflect the experience of another person is also another way to deeply signal back to the person your respect for them. So, team techniques, these are a way to give yourself access to the deeper presence that comes from noticing, not ever letting an opportunity go by. All right. So now you know what the micro skills are. What gets in the way? Like, what's the thing that keeps us from accessing and embodying a deeper presence with another person? Here's the question. Which aspect of perceiving do you most want to improve? And I'm going to give you some choices. I want you to rank order each choice. Now, do this from your gut instinct or from your intuition. Don't overthink it. Don't ever analyze or bring too many ideas to mind. Just trust the first response that comes up. If you rate it a 5, that's the most important one to improve. If you rate it a 1, yeah, I'm pretty good at that. Okay, so anywhere along the line, 1 to 5. Here's the first one. Recognizing energy. Noticing language shift. My favorite is somebody's talking in an I voice and they're really in it. They're in their experience and they're owning it. And then all of a sudden they switch to you, which tells me they're having a little bit of distance and maybe a little bit of discomfort. That makes me very curious. Challenging contradictions. They say one thing but describe doing something completely different. Do you notice it and lean into it? Or do you simply notice it and keep listening? Observing incongruities. I was listening to a client the other day wax on about all the things they're doing for their job search. They have a plan, they have it on their calendar, they have metrics to go with it. And before I could actually say anything, they then unwound it all, telling me that, they're not good enough and they don't know which companies to look at, and they're certain that they aren't going to like their background and experience because it's out of date with what's happening out in the market. Like, oh my goodness. Hard to be that person in that moment. But if I'd gone by the incongruity that they were holding this tension, we would have missed the opportunity right then and there to recognize how they were taking themselves out of the learning, growth, and change they'd come to coaching for in the first place. Sensing limits. How well do you listen for limiting beliefs and allow yourself to go after them? And the last, weaving the visible and the invisible. One of the easiest ones here is happening with values. Clients are speaking in values all the time. They don't know it because it's so at the base of who we are. The psychologist Carl Rogers would say values are always at the base of the iceberg, underneath the waterline. It's the least visible, but it's operating all the time. It's core to how we make decisions. And when we can bring the value up to the surface and apply it in a relevant way to whatever it is the client is seeking to resolve, we've made visible what's invisible to them. And they come back home to the wholeness, which is always going to include their values. All right. So what came up? Which one of those do you most want to improve? The last one, Olga. Okay. Sensing limits, Cindy. Mm-hmm. Lori was grinding your teeth in an earlier comment. Okay.
That's when I'm tense. I notice I'm grinding my teeth.
Oh, got it. Okay. Observing incongruities. Okay. Yes, I can put the slide back up. There you go. Oh, thank you, Cindy. That was sweet. Stopping at the observation is a challenge. So, Paula, what have you pursued to break through the stopping at the observation?
What have I pursued to break through stopping at the observation? So, I think I, as per usual, I'm going to answer with a lot of words. Um, a lot of this resonated with me in terms of showing up whole. I think I'm somebody who tends to show up very whole and has not always, that has not always been well received by the people that I show up with. So, I think that gives you like a hard candy coating.
Mm.
And so it's easy to like, it's funny because challenging contradictions is like, oh, I'm good at that. But then observing incongruities was the like, oh, like observing it without pushing on it was the like, those are two very different things that I don't know I would have thought about, that I would have thought about as different. Um, so long part, I guess the short answer is I'm just trying to slow down, and I've gotten better, I think, at embracing that silence. Always with more room to grow because the snarky responses that fill the silence come naturally.
Yeah.
I think where I'm at.
Noticing even as you responded, you allowed yourself to evolve in the way you were sharing to a slower and softer cadence as you delivered it, right?
Yeah,
And
thanks.
and I think, Paula, you're raising something that many of us have been challenged by living inside of systems that are asking us to go faster and be more intense and doesn't value pausing to slow down and leave more space for others, although that's what the engagement data has been telling us for 20 years. So, there's an interesting incongruity and contradiction in that. And, I often will say to leaders, what is the cost to the organization of the speed at which you are moving?
Well, I think I have a bias towards speed, not
Yeah.
just because my organization is, I work for the government, it's not speedy, which maybe is why I push to move faster. Um, but that is very data oriented and it doesn't leave as much room for relationship, which I value very strongly. So it's an interesting um, brain function polarity.
Yeah. Regardless of whether it goes slow or it goes fast, it's the attention to speed was what I was pointing to. Just as we give attention to time and how we construct what's worthy of our attention and what's not worthy of our attention, these are all also examples of things that are invisible because for most of us, it comes out of habit. It might come out of, the workplace culture has a certain rhythm. Hideo, maybe you want to speak to this. When you're working in extreme cross-cultural difference, and they have different paces that are preferred and different tolerance for risk that is preferred. As leaders, it's really important to keep that in the front of our mind, whether leader of self, leader as coach, leader as organizational responsibility. And the ability to recognize that tension is in the field. All of those things that we're perceiving, the 6 that I gave you to examine, all carry with them an emotional and a physical impact. It's not whether it does or it doesn't, it does, period. The question is, do you notice it? And then, do you let it activate your creativity? You might ask an open-ended question to find out if it's even true. Or is it just me that's experiencing this? I can tell you, Paula, you and I have a shared experience around organizations not receiving being pushed on hard. And what I began to realize, it wasn't that I was pushing hard. It was the way I was pushing hard. And so, it was probably a good 10 years before I learned that I was trying to prove something. And I didn't have anything to prove, but it was all unconscious, much earlier time in my life. when people wouldn't give me the time of day because I was different from them. But you know what? When I got home to myself, I didn't need to push so hard anymore. And I began to learn cadence, tone, pace, language use. Well, these are all things that we help leaders with too. And it requires that we have deep presence with self and we allow the client to have deep presence with themselves because we don't have anything to prove with them. I can challenge just as well with a few words, very softly spoken. Sometimes it's, client, can you stop talking? And I might have to say it 2 or 3 times, but they'll finally go, oh, I so left this conversation, didn't I? How often does that happen with your team? That's more important than anything else we're talking about. And it happens because of the deep presence with them. This is the expansion that's possible when you stop worrying about, do I have the skills in my bones? And you're more attentive to letting your way of connecting, your unique expression as a human being, trust that what you're picking up is relevant and useful. Because what's relevant and useful is showing right up in front of you in the what the client is choosing to say and make important. All right, let's see what else is here. Did you want to add anything to that, Paula? Yeah.
I think it's something that we work. I came to the realization, and I think a lot of people who are achievers are people who spent their lives proving. Um, Women work at, and I'm a second sibling. I'm the younger one, so proving that you're just as good as.
Right.
And I did hit that moment where I'm like, I'm done with this. Um, and it's definitely still the habit. And when I notice the habit, I'm much more able to say, yeah, I'm a mint chocolate chip, and this is a vanilla situation. And it's not about me. This is just not for me. Um, and that's got to be okay.
Exactly. And for all of us to realize, how often do you have a similar metaphor to what Paula has just said, but you don't say anything? I say this to teams all the time. You know what? I'm kind of a mint chocolate chip, and you guys are stuck in vanilla. And you have this big, huge strategy you want to go after. What's going on in the room that you're not taking the risk to share something that's a little out of the box? So use everything is the moral to the story and really lean into trusting your perceiving. And with that, I'm going to give you a little fun thing to do. I'm going to show you a series of 4 images. I will stay on the image for 10 seconds. And I want you to write as fast as you can. Do not overthink this. Again, instinct and intuition. What's the dynamic that you think is occurring as you look at the image? Everybody got the guidelines? What's the dynamic you think is occurring as you look at the image? Everybody ready? The ones I can see, are you gonna nod for me? Okay. All right. Here is your first image. All right. When did you learn about your bias and assumption looking at those images? What might you have learned about how your gut instinct and your heart's intuition see things a little differently? What was surprising to you? It's like, oh my gosh, where did that come from? Never occurred to me to think about it that way. All right, a couple of popcorn shares. What was the point in giving you an opportunity to do it that a quick noticing for yourself? Go ahead, Lori.
We sometimes react from the place that we've been in before. So for me, probably where the emotion hit me was in the picture of the two people where one was leaning over the other with his finger like this. It comes from a place of shock that someone would speak that way to another person. Having been in HR, like, having had to discipline and to coach in a corporate world. So it's funny right away. That's where my heart goes is, oh, how awful. And that may not even be what's happening in the picture. So as a coach, I look at it differently than I might as having been in an HR operational role.
Good. Really, really important distinction. And what's the other possibility that was going on there?
Exactly.
If you flip the penny over, right? Every time we're in the experience of something, can we pause for a moment and flip the penny over for ourselves?
Exactly.
And
Yes.
ask the question, what were you experiencing, leader, in that moment? As you've shared this story with me, what was going on for you?
Yeah. And sometimes people are telling you a story. They're not reacting to you. So that gentleman may have been saying, and I told them like this, like it was a very emphatic conversation. And he demonstrated that with his physicality. So
He might have even been telling a joke.
exactly.
Like, can you believe this person was behaving like this? Right? It could have been. And so the impulse that we have to take care, to be empathetic and support, these are part of the skills in the core competencies of being a coach, are benefiting by slowing down a little bit and letting our presence take the full possibility in. Not to comment back necessarily, but to let it fuel our curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Hami, go ahead.
Yeah. Something noticed and surprising at the same time. I got connected to, except one picture, I got connected to one character, and I was looking for something dynamic that what it made those reaction. And finally, I was surprised that there are a lot of things, that a lot of energy that are happening around me if I am that person or the other one or the other one, and I cannot notice them.
Yeah.
And they are hidden from my sight because I am looking for one direction. Even the person, the picture, fantasy picture. So it was very surprising and a bit, I felt a bit, heavy that, oh, there are a lot that you don't notice, Hami. Yeah.
Yes, and in that is the bias that you should be able to notice all the angles. And so the place of liberation is to say, I can't possibly know all the angles, and I can keep opening. So if I see this, what else might be here? What else is a possibility? Which is a really common question leaders and coaches ask all the time. Somebody gives the first right answer, and we say, what's another right answer? So we do it in a transactional way. And the invitation here is to do it in an experiential or relational way. To take in the first right answer when you're listening or looking at an image, and then pause a little longer. Oh, what else comes up? Do you see the pattern in Midnight Mail? Same thing. We can do it spontaneously as well. The kind of futuristic image, Hami, when I first looked at it before I put it in the deck, I went, oh, I still want to hang out with that guy. And then I pulled back and went, oh, but he's kind of lost in this crazy outer space place. That would feel really lonely. Like I had both happening within the space of a few seconds. I went, oh, I got to put that picture in. Right? And it's the pause that we allow ourselves to fully absorb the experience, whatever it is for us, not as the only truth, just a set of truths, which means the other person we're with has their set of truths. And if we spoke those out loud, we made space for them to get expressed, we have the seed of innovation, some combination of all of those truths. Anybody else want to share? All right.
Catherine's raised her hand, Janet.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
My little aha moment was actually the minute we finished the exercise, because you had said, don't overthink it, just write them down. So you fashed up 4 sides. I had an immediate response. And when we finished, I thought, and I bet everybody else on this call saw something different.
Isn't that the beauty of humanity? I love that, Catherine. Thank you so much. Exactly. Practice this. Buy magazines you don't normally buy. Not to read the articles, but to look at the images and pay attention to which ones activate you. Go to a movie that's in a genre you wouldn't normally go to and strengthen your ability to receive that and be in curiosity about it. That's why I love anybody in a book club. That's why I love book club, because we come and discuss the book and people will say things. I'm like, that was in this book? I don't remember that character that way at all. Wow, there's the place for me to open and strengthen my presence with what's right in front of me, beyond the boundary of my own limits, beyond the boundary of my own conditioning, beyond the boundary of my own bias. Bias isn't inherently bad. It's our reactive, habitual behavior and response that misses what's actually occurring in front of us. This is what we're after on the journey to wholeness. And it takes our deep presence to do it. All right. I want to give you a little bit of a compare and contrast. And as we're winding down here, where did my Zoom go? There it is. I get asked this question a lot. Why generative, Janet? What's generative about? Um, and as I said to you earlier, it really came out of my work with leaders and their teams, and the out of balance that I could see. High priority based on the transactional effort, throughput, productivity, and not much regard for the consequences of over prioritizing that and under prioritizing the humanity or the relational field. So that was my early beginning, that wholeness. It takes both the transaction and the relationship to produce results. Simple in a family, right? If both parents aren't on the same page, the kids figure out who to go to for what in order to manipulate the situation in their favor. Same thing happens in the workplace. So here's what I'm going to do with this. I'm going to kind of do a compare and contrast. A perfectly fine coaching question at the transactional level. What result do you want to produce? At the generative level, I might ask, what do you want to resolve to move this forward? Notice that the question is going to ask them to answer interiorly and have ownership interiorly to move forward, as opposed to thinking about the destination. What resources do you need to accomplish this? Perfectly fine question. What do you believe is the source of the block to moving forward? Signaling my respect for this person's resourceful, capable, creative selves, and that they simply want the invitation to figure out how are they in their own way. How will you approach this effort? Again, perfectly fine question, good for planning, good discipline. What's your evidence that the block is immovable? Because what I know is that they know how to plan. They know how to find resource. They know how to set goals. But that's not what sticks them. It's their experience moment to moment where they get stopped. And if we can reveal that, now we're liberating all of that untapped potential inside of them. How will you measure your progress and recognize success? Very encouraging, could be part of a positive feeling, might get you close to clear direction and that hope we're looking for. But I want something a little bit more empowering and sustaining of autonomy. What new belief supports you to access your capability? So generative is designed to bring the insight, not the intellect, forward and help them to realize, yeah, it was there all the time. Those of you that maybe have watched The Wizard of Oz, Dorothy has a pair of red shoes and the guy says to her, the wizard, they were there all the time. Just have to tap your heels together and you could get back home. That's coaching. It's a beautiful metaphor that everything we want in order to pursue our aspiration is already inside of us. If somebody simply partners to help us remember and to access it and to believe. That's the difference between transactional and generative work. So as we've been together today, I'm hoping you've had an experience now of being generative together and of perceiving through deep presence. So here's my call to action for you. Imagine what you could accomplish if every conversation you have, regardless of role that you're in, invites a deeper connection. Imagine what would happen then if teams that felt heard, organizations that are thriving on trust, and leaders who inspire not by speaking, but by listening for what isn't being said, that is part of that person's wholeness. And imagine the influence of listening on your confidence and relevance to be creators of hope, fulfilling the need to feel positive about the future because you generated a clear direction. And here is the call to action question. What will you notice when you stop filling the silence and start perceiving within it? This is the road to mastery, and it's lifelong. This is in the deck. You'll be getting it. These are all the ways in which we work with organizations, coaching ed, bespoke programs for organizations, and executive coaching and team coaching. And there's all our contact information. I would love to talk with you. And of course, on social media, sharing what your experience has been today and yesterday if you were here as well. Let's keep the conversation going because we are always better together. Thanks, everybody. Any closing comments? How would you like to complete today? Thank you, Paula, for your contributions today too. Thank you.
I'm going to
Mark.
write on hope. It's just so wonderful to hear, and would love to create an echo of that. So thank you.
Yes, and Hideo's given us a great inspiration. Hope is generated by the internal silence so that we can bring that external. Beautiful. Anything else?
I like the exercise when we looked at those 4 words in the beginning, with artistry, mastery, that and so on. And in our group, it was like a case of an ACC, a PCC, and an MCC walk into a room. What is that conversation like? And
Oh my God, stand-up comic are you, Carol? That's awesome.
and one of the realizations I came to is that over the past few months, I've been focusing a lot on, I want mastery. I want to master this. But I actually realized from listening to others and just, things bubbling up inside that it really is artistry that is the key for me. And trusting in my own artistry, and that is the key to feeling like, you know, I'm inching towards, you know, mastery never ends, right? But you know what I mean? Then feeling like, oh yeah, I think I can lift that weight that I wanted to lift all of this time.
Yeah. And you can hear it begins with believing in you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much. Wonderful to be with you all. And we'll be doing this again about the same time at the end of March. Our theme for March is leadership. So we'll dig even a little deeper than we did today. And see you all then, and also on social media along the byway. And call Lori or I if there's anything we can do to support you with your education and coaching needs. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. What a great group.
Indeed.